So, Jim, I'm gonna put you in the spotlight. Here you go, man. I will mute myself. Let's have a listen to Jim Kissane from Tampa Bay, Florida.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you all. What I'd like to share with you today is one of my original historical tales that I call a delicate proposition. Seth Wheeler, a tinkerer with a very practical mind, was hunched over his workbench in Albany, New York. The year was 1871, and the spirit of innovation crackled in the air. While other inventors were chasing grand inventions like steam engines, Seth pondered a far less glamorous realm, the privy. Back then, nature's call was a far cry from the porcelain thrones of today. Rural folks relied on outhouses, drafty, fly-infested structures where comfort was a distant dream. And winters in upstate New York tended to be brutal. A trip to the outhouse could be a harrowing experience. Imagine the bite of the cold air, the fear of a startled snake that was escaping the elements, or a spider scampering across a frozen seat. Wiping, in such circumstances, became a desperate act, often resorting to rough pages torn from a catalog that was nailed to the wall, or the scratchy discomfort of leaves or corn cobs. Seth, a man born of both practicality and a nascent sense of hygiene, saw a problem ripe for solving. He envisioned a machine that could churn out perforated paper, sheets that were pre-torn for a more dignified hygiene experience. Now, the concept, which turned out to be the solution, was fraught with challenges. Toilet matters were the ultimate taboo in society of the day, whispered only about in hushed tones, never openly discussed. How could he possibly convince people to pay for something that was so inherently undignified? Undeterred, he kept working on it, and in 1871 patented a machine and formed the Albany Perforated Wrapping Company. He started with a safer bet, wrapping paper. The perforations were a convenient novelty for shopkeepers and people. Slowly, he transitioned to his true goal, toilet paper. He christened his creation the Albany Perforated Paper, a euphemism that danced around its true purpose. Marketing was a delicate dance. Billboards and large proclamations were out of the question. Seth relied on subtle print ads, strategically placed in health journals and women's magazines. The message was coded: comfort, hygiene, civility, and a touch of femininity, the domain of the lady of the house. The initial response was tepid, as you might imagine. People balked at the idea of buying something so personal, especially when the solution wasn't quite ideal. The Albany Perforated Paper was rough and thin, prone to tearing easily. Its absorbency was low, largely due to the quality of paper manufacturing technology of the day. And the worst part, the products, all wood products, had wood splinters. Seth envisioned a future of hygiene, but the reality was a scratchy present. Yet a seed had been sown. Slowly, the convenience of perforated paper, despite its shortcomings, began to win converts. Mrs. Amelia Peabody, a housewife known for her enlightened and progressive views, was one of the first to embrace this innovation, relieved at least by the pre-torn sheets. Doctors, also ever the champions of hygiene, cautiously endorsed its use. Dr. Horatio Graham, a prominent area physician, witnessed firsthand the health consequences of poor hygiene. He too yearned for a more effective solution like Seth to become more widely adopted. When Dr. Graham's article praising the hygienic benefits of perforated paper appeared in Scientific America and the monthly science magazines, albeit perfect, in the article's presentation, and acknowledging the still imperfect nature of the product, Seth felt a real surge of pride. This public endorsement by a respected physician was indeed a turning point. The social stigma, however, of the day remained. Jokes and innuendo followed Seth's creation. Negative articles mocked the very idea, but undeterred, Seth pressed on, his determination fueled by a belief in the importance of improved sanitation. He envisioned a future where hygiene was a basic human necessity, and his perforated paper, though a work in progress, was the key. By the 1880s, with indoor plumbing starting to become more common, the need for a more discreet and sanitary wiping solution intensified. Seth, with his never-evolving desire in his ever-evolving patents for improved perforation of the rolls and even toilet paper holders, found himself at the forefront of a quiet revolution. The delicate proposition, as some wags called it, was slowly becoming a household necessity. Seth Wheeler, the tinkerer that since his youth had dared to tackle the unmentionable, unfortunately wouldn't live to see the full impact of his invention. But his innovation, perforated paper, a product born of practicality and a touch of social rebellion, paved the way for a more hygienic future, one uncomfortable sheet at a time. And his invention, though initially flawed, laid the groundwork for softer, more absorbent toilet paper, bidets, and flushable toilets. Today, with open advertising campaigns and a more enlightened society, it's hard for us to imagine a time when such a basic necessity was shrouded in secrecy and discomfort. Seth Wheeler's legacy is a reminder that even imperfect inventions can spark a revolution, leaving a lasting impact on our daily lives, but also reminding us that the modern convenience we all enjoy and take for granted today began with one man who was committed to giving a sheet.
Nice, nice. Well, that does remind me. That does. Oh, Rona's here too. Hi, Rona. Welcome. You amazing you. I do have inspired by Jim this story about my biggest fears. Like now, I'm a pretty courageous man. Well, let put myself in the spotlight. That is nice to do. I never did so here on the Kaylee, but now, look at me. Am I adorable? Well, that's why I put myself in the spotlight so I don't see you when you're not. No, um, which is actually pretty smart, I think. But now you are talking, Jim, about flushable toilets. When I was a youngster, I always made my brother flush the toilet. I was so afraid that if I would flush it, I was such a small guy, I would be sucked in and go through the sewer, and it was really terrifying. And it was not my only fear. If it was my turn to go to bed, my time to go to bed, my brother had to watch behind the curtains and watch in the closet and watch under my bed, because I was sure, I was absolutely sure there was a ghost living under my bed. And if that would have been all my fears, that would have been okay. But for instance, I had this pair of pants. They were pink with flowers, red leaves, and then yellow hearts. I loved them, but I would never dare to wear them if I was going out, because people could make fun of it. And then when it was my turn, when I was old enough to go to the baker store for the first time in my life, there was a queue and it was my turn, and it was just this wee little boy, and I was just gonna do my ordering when a grown-up woman said, "Could I please have 2 brown loaves of bread?" Like I wasn't there. She was just taking my place in the queue, and I was angry, but I didn't dare to say, "I'm sorry, but I was here first." So I came home completely disillusioned about myself. That's not a word, but I was not happy with who I was, as frightened as I was. I hated to be this frightened little man, this scared little man. And well, nowadays we have Google, but then we had the Golden Guide here in the Netherlands, the yellow papers, and every company was advertising in the yellow papers. And I was looking and looking and looking and looking and looking until I found a company that was specialized in treating fear. And it was called Magic Tree Against Your Fears. So there was this phone number, and I dialed it, the old phone, and it says, "I'm sorry, you cannot have a conversation through the phone. You have to be here in person so I can treat you. You can make an appointment for tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I said, okay. Well, actually, I said, okay, because I was this frightened, scared little man. And then the phone on the other side said, I do live in the wild forest. And well, there's a lot of ferocious creatures living in that forest, but don't worry, they won't harm you. They are absolutely innocent creatures. I said, okay. So next morning I put the alarm and I went, and about 9 o'clock I was at the entry of the wild forest. And it was so good that voice had warned me, because there was this giant dragon right at the entry, smoke coming out of his nose, and every once in a while he coughed, and a huge fireball was coming out of his mouth. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Hi, I am on my way to the magic tree. I have this appointment there." "Okay, that is cool. Could you please send my greetings?" Oh, okay. So I went on and I walked, and in the advertisement it said that from the entry you would walk on, and then at the third skeleton you had to go left, and there was the magic tree. So I walked on, and then I heard something like shh, shh, and suddenly I was hanging upside down, completely tied in a giant spider web. And a huge spider walked up to me, and well, I would do like this, but he had too many legs. So I don't know with which legs he did this or she did that. And a voice said that she loved to have the meat of little scary people. And I said, well, I'm on my way to the magic tree. And the spider was very sorry. She bit through all the spider web threads. And she said, oh, if you were there, could you please tell the tree that the scarf that I'm weaving for him is just about ready? Okay. So I walked up, and in the distance I already saw that third skeleton. And then this cold, bony hand came into my neck, and I heard a voice sound like, "What are you doing in my garden?" And I looked around, and there was this woman who had more hair coming from the dot on the nose above the green drippings, and then she had on her hair. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I didn't know this was your garden. I was going to the magic tree. And the woman said, oh, well, I think nothing is broken. It's okay. Oh, would you please bring that pumpkin to the magic tree so he can make some soup from it? Yeah, sure, I will. So I went left, and there he was, the magic tree. I couldn't see a mouse, but when it spoke, my whole body was vibrating because of the low voice. And it said, hello, why are you here and what are you doing here? So I said that I had the appointment. And what are you coming for? Well, I'm this scared little man, and what would you like to be then? Well, I would have wanted to be a less scared little man. Well, didn't you meet a dragon? Yes. Oh, and it said to send you the greetings. Mm. And the spider? Yeah, your scarf is about ready. And the witch? Yeah, I have this pumpkin here for you. I don't think you are a scared little man. I actually think that you are a pretty brave little man. And I thought, wow, that is really magic. Oh, wow, tree, that is a wonderful spell. And I felt so brave that I went back and I said that to the witch that the pumpkin was nice, and the spider that the tree was happy that the scarf was just about ready. And I said to the dragon that the tree gave the greetings back. And then I went to home, and I pulled on my pink pair of trousers with the flowers, and I went out to the baker's store feeling so wonderful, feeling so beautiful. And then it was my turn, and someone said from behind me, could I please have 2 loaves of bread? And I said, I'm sorry, it is my turn. You have to wait your turn. And then I ordered 2 little pieces of pastry, such nice pastry with sweetened whipped cream and chocolate and nuts and whatever. And then I went home, and I went to my bedroom, and one piece of pastry was for me, and the other one I did put under my bed for the ghost. And it was so nice. Thank you. Well, that was all because Jim told, and he reminded me of my fear for flushing toilets. That was such a great introduction. Is there anyone else that might have something with flushing toilets? Cathy, what is your thing with Flushing toilets. Let's put you in the spotlight first. It's always good to talk about your flushing toilet stories in public. So come on, Cathy.
Um, a long time ago, I was with my very good friend, Aldrina Bluecorn, who's a Pueblo Native American teller. And she was so excited because we had both been asked to tell ghost stories for the Denton Courthouse just outside the Storytelling Festival. And she was excited that they asked her, that they knew her work, that they liked her voice. And then suddenly she panicked and she said, "Oh, Cathy, I just realized, of course, this is ghost stories. And I am from the Pueblo people, and we don't tell ghost stories." And I told her, "Oh, Drina, I have sat up many, many nights with you while you have told me tons of stories, tons of stories. And I know that one of them would easily, easily take its place in the lineup of ghost stories in Denton." And she said, "What are you talking about?" So Drina Bluecorn now reminded her that when she was a little girl and she lived on the reservation, her mom and her dad both worked in the city. They didn't stay on the reservation. She stayed there with her grandmother, and she loved her grandmother. As a matter of fact, everybody loved her grandmother. Her grandmother made the best fry bread. And in the American Southwest, among the Pueblo people and many other tribes, fry bread is a true specialty. And everyone makes it a little differently. It's made with flour and baking powder and some kind of lard or fat. And then there's always a secret ingredient that's the ingredient from the people that you are from. But her grandmother made wonderful fry bread. So one evening, her grandmother invited everyone to come to their house for fry bread. It was a coolish, coolish day and a colder night, and people were happy for the nice deep fried, thin crusted fry bread that her grandmother made. She didn't call her grandmother. Uh, uh, she uh, she had another name for her, a Native American name for her. Um, and I've just forgotten what it will come to me. Saya, that's what it is. It's Saya. So all the people came to their house. All the people had the fry bread. And you know, when people get together, like with Anne, it's good company, good times, good stories, good jokes, good giggles, a little bit of gossip. You know how it goes. And the time flew by. And it got into the dark of evening as the sun set. And several times, Drina's grandmother, her Saya, asked her, "Drina, do you need to use the outhouse while it's still sunny outside?" And Drina said, "No, no, no, I don't. I'm fine. I'm fine." She said, "All right, all right." Well, then the people finished their goodbyes and hugs and kisses, and they all left, and it was dark, and it was cold outside, and they all waved goodbye. And then Drina Saya asked her one more time, "Are you sure you don't need to use the outhouse out back?" And Drina said, "No, no, I'm fine, Saya." And they both got into bed and snuggled down. And as soon as Drina was comfortable in her blankets and her pajamas, she realized she had to go to the bathroom. Yep. So she tiptoed over to her grandmother's bed and pushed her on the shoulder and said, "Saya, Saya." Her grandmother said, "Ah," which grandmothers are prone to do. Now that I am one, I can tell you for a fact. That's a direct quote. And she said, "Well, Saya, I do have to go to the bathroom." She said, Drina." So grandmother got up and Drina put on her own pink coat and grandmother put on the big black shawl that kept her warm. And they went out the front door and up the little hill to the back side of the house where the outhouse was. And Drina said, "I will be fast, Saya, I will be fast." So she opened the door, ran inside. The door slammed behind her. The wooden door slammed. And like Jim said, you know, there was the nice catalog, Sears catalog stapled to the wall there. And so Drina finally got to go to the bathroom and she was much more comfortable and was just about to get herself put back together again when she heard something terrifying. She heard a voice, and it was all around her, a deep voice, like the deep voice of the magic man that Marin was talking about. It rumbled, and it said, Drina, I am not your Saya anymore. I have shape shifted into the great and terrible. And Drina jumped out the door and went, ah! And her grandmother went, oh, Drina was so angry that her grandmother made that voice and scared her like that. She said, Saya, that was not nice. He said, it was good. It was good. But now that I am here, I think I need to use the outhouse too. You wait for me. So now Drina was shifting from foot to foot in her little pink jacket out in the cold. And Saya was in using the outhouse. And Drina decided to get her revenge. So she said in her loudest, scariest voice, Saya, I am not your little Drina anymore. I have shape shifted into the great and into the terrible. Bang! Grandma came out the door of the outhouse and scared her a second time. And Drina went, Saya, that is 2 times. That's not nice. And grandmother said, next time I ask you if you need to use the outhouse, you speak up before the dark and the cold take us both. And that's the story that Drina told that night as in the ghost story concert in Denton at the courthouse. And it was a huge hit, even though there was not one single ghost in the story. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, you amazing Cathy. Yeah, let's make that a word. An amazing Cathy. Is there anyone else here that would like to practice to be an amazing Cathy as well? I think David could make a tremendous Cathy if he wanted to. So first cuff David, and then just do your best Cathy. Here's David. Well, you can
Hey,
read it
everybody.
yourself.
Hello. I'm so glad I was able to connect. I've been having some problems with Zoom. I don't know why, but I'm not a tech person. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a story that has nothing to do with outhouses. And I've been doing research and reading into the Mesoamerican civilizations. And I have come across an absolutely beautiful story, and have told it a few times, from the Aztecs. And we always think of the Aztecs as being fierce and bloody and da-da-da-da-da-da, but they have some of the most beautiful, beautiful stories. And this is one that I have told, and I hope I can get through it correctly, with everything. And I'm going to impress you. You're going to hear some Nahuatl, which is the language of the Aztecs. So I am going to tell you the plumed serpent and the morning star. Nilsi piali tiale, juwala ion kakaki no sasanil. Brothers and sisters, come and hear my story. When the great Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, gathered together those who were to be his, they created a beautiful city of Tulan. And in that beautiful city of Tulan, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, taught them gold and silver work, how to weave with feathers, taught them about the calendar, taught them about how to plant corn and raise animals, and all were very, very content. Such was the city of Tulan, ruled by Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, the plumed serpent himself. And all was well. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, was sitting in his palace one day. Oh, and such a palace it was. 4 walls. The east was covered with gold. It shined in the sun. The west was covered in green with turquoise and jade. The south was white with pearls and silver, and the north was red with bloodstones and shells. And all were happy. And Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, was very, very content. One day, though, who should come but his rival, Tezcatlipoca, he of the smoking mirror. And he went to the palace doors, and he demanded to see his ruler. He demanded to see Quetzalcoatl. And the guard at the door went and told, and Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, said, "Let him come in." So Tezcatlipoca, he of the smoking mirror, approached and said, "I am here to show you your future." And picking up the obsidian mirror, the smoking mirror, he showed Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, what he actually looked like. And Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, was aghast. "I have gotten old. I'm wrinkled. I cannot rule. My people would not respect me. I can't." And was totally and completely devastated. Tezcatlipoca said, but here, drink this. And handed Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, a cup. And in that cup was pulque. And in that pulque, Tezcatlipoca had put amanita mushroom, the magic mushroom. Tezcatlipoca said, "Here, drink. Drink, you will be fine." Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, took the cup and tasted it, and and he drank it down, and then had visions. He had visions of the gods. He had visions of the universe. And he called, "Bring my sister, Quetzalcoatl. Bring her. She must try this also." So his servants went and got Quetzalcoatl and brought her. And he said, "Here, drink, taste this. It's something you will like." Quetzalcoatl took it and she drank. And together, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, and his sister Quetzalcoatl saw the gods, saw the universe, saw each other. And they laid together that evening. In the morning, when Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people, awoke, he saw what he had done. "Oh, I cannot. I have done. This is wrong. What can I do? I cannot rule my people anymore. I must leave. But first I must purify myself." So he had his servants dig a deep, deep pit. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, descended into the pit, and his servants covered it. So he was in entire darkness. After 4 days, they took the top off. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, ascended up and said, "I must leave. I have been told I can no longer rule. I must go to Tlapalan, the land of red delight. I must go. You must have a new ruler." And so it was. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and no longer king of his people, left, bringing with him his servants and his pipers and his dancers. And they left Tulan. And they walked east towards the great, great ocean. And there was a time when they had to rest. And when they rested, where it was an old tree, ancient of age, bending down, wrinkled bark, drooping leaves. And Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, no longer high priest and king of his people, sat under the shade of that tree and rested. And he looked back to where his city was, where Toulon was, his beloved city. And tears went down his cheeks into the rivulets of the wrinkles. And that place became known as Huehuecoatitlan, the tree of old age. Quetzalcoatl plumed serpent rose, and with his retinue, they continued walking east, until they had to rest again. And there were great rocks and great flat areas that were rocks also. Quetzalcoatl plumed serpent sat on those rocks. And he looked back at Toulon, the city that he loved, the people that he had to leave. And again, tears went down his cheeks. And when he had rested, he rose. And when he rose, you could see the handprints that he had left in the stone. And it became known as Tepencalco, the mark of the hands. They rose and continued traveling east to the great ocean. And they came upon an area that they did not know, but there must have been enemies. For they were stopped by the gods of that area and said, you must give us everything you have taught your people. You must teach us how to work silver. You must teach us how to work gold and weave feathers and the calendar. Plumed serpent said, here, take them. I need them no longer. And that became known as Coapan, where the gods demanded gifts. And at that place, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, took off his great collar of jewels and gems and tossed them into the water. And that became known as Coazpa, the water of precious stones. And together, he, his retinue, his flute players, his dancers, continued their journey east to the great ocean. And they came upon an area, a place that was absolutely quiet. No sound, no birds, no animals, no people. And Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, gave it the name Cochtan, the city of sleepers. And they rested in the quiet. And after they had rested, they rose, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent and his retinue, and they continued their journey towards the east. And there they came to an area where on one side was snow and freezing rain, and on the other side were volcanoes and heat, and it all came down upon all of the people, all of the retinue. And when it was over, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, was the only one left. And he looked around, and he knew he must continue east. He must continue to the ocean. When he came to that area right before the ocean, to Mount Payaricatl, the hill of many colors, and he climbed it ever so carefully. For over the top of the mountain, he could see the great ocean. And he went down the other side, and he came to the sands that covered the area, the sands where the oceans, the waters came in waves. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, knew he must continue. He must cross the ocean to Tlapalan, the land of red delight. So he called to them, the serpents and the snakes, and they slithered in. And they rose, and they bowed to him. And he bowed to them. And the snakes came, and they entwined themselves into a raft. And on that raft, Quetzalcoatl the plumed serpent stood, and they went across the ocean to go to Talapalan, the land of red delights. And when they landed on the beach, Quetzalcoatl stepped off the raft. The snakes untwined. They rose. They bowed to him, and he bowed to them, and they left. And there he was, in Talapalan, the land of red delight. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, knew it was time. So he gathered what he could of wood and branches and burning things and dead bushes, and he created a huge fire, and he lit it and laid himself down on it to give back. But the heart of Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, began beating harder and faster and harder and faster, and burst forth from his chest and ascended into the skies, accompanied by the beautiful quetzal birds, where it became Venus, the morning star, she who leads the sun from his home. But some say Quetzalcoatl did not die. Some say he is still around. And so this once and future king will return someday, one day. Tlasokamati. Thank you. Marin, you're muted.
Thank you. Sometimes you have to push twice, but I'm a pretty good pusher, so no worries. But you were right. When Quetzalcoatl would come back, he could just as well be one of the very, 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 very few people that I would bow for, because I think that only people who would return the bow are worth bowing for. And well, that might be just why some storytellers like to tell stories from Native American people, because somehow there's a different kind of respect. Here we want the respect for the biggest house, of the huge, the biggest, the best knife or gun or the most money, but just the respect for you, because you are alive just like I am, and because you're a complex being just like I am, a person with just as well ideas to be a very nice person and then to fumble and do pretty stupid things instead. Well, that's worth bowing for, I think. Anyway. Is there anyone who would love to tell a story? Ann Lister. Wow, if you never heard Ann Lister before, you are in for a treat here. Make sure you pay attention. Ann.
Thank you, Marin. I'm actually going to record this as well for myself. I need to have a clip to send somebody, and I haven't got any separate clips of me telling stories, so this is going to be it. I've got to ask your permission, Marin.
I will allow.
Okay. Right, so I presume I just go ahead now. I don't know what's going on now. Do I?
Otherwise, if you
Yeah,
don't
that's
have
okay.
the
It's
recording,
okay. No, it's going. It's fine. Right. I'm going to apologise to a couple of people here because I know you've heard this story before. But I know there are some who haven't. And I wanted to just boast a little bit about the fact that since I was last here, I have got 2 books that have come out. And the one is the story that this story comes from, which is called The Tale of Joffrey. And the other is about my research that went into all the stuff that I've been working on. So there's a lot of, there turned out to be stories within stories within stories. So The Tale of Joffrey is a story written in Occitan, and it was written, I think, in the year 1225 for King James I of Aragon. And it is the most intriguing story. It is an Arthurian story, but it's not like stories you may have heard before about King Arthur. So this is the opening of the story, and you will notice that the hero doesn't appear at all, but King Arthur does. And rather like other great leaders, as we've heard from David, King Arthur has to, what can I say, swallow his pride a little bit. So our story opens at Pentecost, where King Arthur was holding court at the great castle of Carduel, and people were all there. The knights that you'll have heard of before were there. So Lancelot was there, and Gawain was there, and Eric was there, Ivan, Percival, Caradoc, and they were all sitting around and talking to each other about adventures. And the time went fairly fast, but time went on, and they began to get quite hungry. And after a while, Sir Kay came through the hall and said, "It's time to eat, I think, King Arthur. Let's go to table." And Arthur got a bit cross, and he said, "No, Kay," he said, "you know very well that we never eat on a great feast until we've had an adventure, and no adventure has happened. So we will wait." And so they went back to their conversations, and they talked, and they talked, and they talked, and they were all getting very hungry indeed. And suddenly King Arthur felt he'd had enough. He thought, right, if no adventure is coming to us, let's go and find an adventure ourselves. So he called everyone to get whatever weapons they wanted, whatever equipment they wanted, and they set off in a great line. The lords and the ladies, the squires, the maidens, they all went into the great forest of Broceliande, which surrounded the castle of Carduel, as I'm sure you know. So they went into the forest deeper and deeper, until King Arthur said, "Wait, stop, listen." And in the distance, they could hear a woman calling for help. "This is for me to sort out," said King Arthur. "You will stay here. I will find out what she needs." And so he set off through the forest on his own. And after a while, he came to a river, and on the banks of the river was a mill. And standing outside the mill was a woman in the greatest despair you could imagine. She was pulling at her hair, she was crying, she was wailing. "Oh, sir," she said, "oh, sir, please help me." "What is it?" asked the king. "A great beast has come down from the mountain, and he's eating all of my grain." "A great beast," said King Arthur. "Oh, please help me." So King Arthur went inside the mill, and indeed there in the mill was an extraordinary creature. It was bigger than an ox. It had spindly legs. It had great big teeth. It had red shaggy pelt, and it had great big horns on its head. And it was chomping away at the grain in the grain hopper without a care in the world. So Arthur tried commanding it to stop, but the beast took no notice. And then Arthur went round the back of the beast and tried pushing it, but it didn't budge. He tried taking the flat of his sword and hitting it across the rump. Didn't move. And so eventually Arthur went round the front. He feinted a punch at the beast. Didn't even blink. And then King Arthur grabbed hold of the horns, trying to pull it. He couldn't move it, but the beast raised its head. And Arthur realized to his horror, he couldn't let go of the horns. And he found himself being carried by the beast through the forest, very gently, very calmly, the beast still chewing on a bit of grain from the hopper, and the beast ambled its way through the forest as if it hadn't got a care in the world. And every so often, his knights would see him, little groups of them standing together, and they were terrified on behalf of the king, and they took their bows and arrows. And Arthur said, no, please don't do anything to harm it. I don't believe the beast means me any harm. But meanwhile, the knights were lamenting what would happen if harm came to King Arthur, the death of chivalry, the death of all good things. And Sir Kay was so overcome, he fell backwards off his horse in a dead faint. Then the beast found there was a big rock in his way, so he climbed to the top of the big rock, and he lowered his head. So now Arthur was dangling from the beast's horns above a great void. And the knights and ladies gathered underneath and said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to save the king? And Gawain had the great idea. He said, what he needs is a soft landing. So take your clothes off. Every bit of clothing, all that you can, and the softest ones are closest to the skin. So strip off completely, make a big pile, and then the king will be safe. So that's what they did. They stripped off, they made a big pile of clothing, and then the beast shifted slightly, and they realized it was not in the right place. But then the beast put his paws together, or his hooves together, and he jumped neatly into the group of people. And Arthur realized he was safe. He was completely fine. And he looked around, and there was one of his best knights, dressed in scarlet. And this had been the beast. He said, I've been studying magic in my spare time, and you made me a wager that I couldn't transform myself in sight of all your people. And if I did, well, I did. I'm going to claim my prize. It will be a gilt cup and a kiss from the maiden of my choice. And Gawain looked at him and said, in fairness, you have magicked us clean out of our clothes. And so everybody gathered up whatever clothing they could from the pile. They put on whatever assortment of pieces they got, and dressed all in motley. The whole court set off back to the palace where they had their feast. And that's where the main part of the story begins, but there won't be time to tell that to you today. But if you want to know more, I can recommend my book. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Again, an amazing story from Anne. And I'm not sure whether Anne still has the time, but maybe after one or two more storytellers, if we would ask her, sometimes Anne is ready to give us a song as well. And if she would, oh boy, make sure you stay online here. And first, let's go to the next storyteller. Who would that be? It will be Mr. Jim Brulé. So I better mute myself and put Jim into the big screen. Jim, you're in the spotlight. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a pleasure it is to be here. I have a story that is really two stories that I learned from a storyteller in Africa, from the Yoruba tribe. And her name is Titi Ogunayeki. And I always like to give her credit for this story. This is a story that is told as an epic. I'll tell you the short version, but it's a historical epic amongst her people. This is one of the things that they use to explain why this great river appears where it does. And here's the story. There once was in Yoruba land a terrible, terrible famine. It was a drought. It was a famine. People were starving. They were dying of not having enough water to drink. And one family, a mother, a father, and their two children, decided the only thing they could do was to travel to a new land to try and survive. And so they took off across parched fields and dusty trails, carrying what little they had. But it wasn't going well. And they couldn't find anything to eat. They couldn't find any water to drink. And the children were complaining with good reason. Mother, mother, we're hungry. Mother, we're thirsty. And the father, who was a hunter, said, I'll take care of this. And he had seen off in the distance a stand of trees. He said, I will go and I will hunt us some food there. Wait for me here and I'll bring it back. And in the morning, the father took off for the stand of trees. And they waited all day through the hot sun. And when evening fell, he was nowhere to be seen. And the children were crying more now. Mother, mother, we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're so thirsty. So when the next morning came and the father hadn't returned, the mother said to her children, I will find us some water. Wait here. And she headed off down the path. And the hot sun came and they lay there, barely able to move. And when she came back, the calabash that she was carrying was empty. And the children said, Mother, hungry. Mother, we're thirsty. Mother, we're dying. And she said, I will find you water. I will find you water. Wait here. And the next morning she took off again. And this time when evening came, she returned to her two children who could barely speak. They could only say, Mother, we're dying. We're dying. And she looked in her calabash, and of course, it was empty. And in great pain and frustration, she lifted up the empty calabash and threw it down on the ground. And in that moment, she was transformed into a river, the river Olu. And the children drank and were healed and refreshed. And it's said that to this very day, if a child of the river, which means one of the offsprings of these two children, should drink from the water of the river Olu, their illnesses will be cured, they will be strengthened, they will be refreshed and renewed. Now, I told you there are two stories. Titi, with my help, went off to visit the river Olu. And she met there the king of the region and the priest of the river. And she asked him to tell her the story because this was a story she had grown up with as a young child. And the priest of the river said, well, you've got it partially right, except there really wasn't a mother. It was just the father. And the father is the one who turned himself into a river. And there's a special power to the river, which is if it's the first thing you drink as a child of the river, you can never speak an untruth. In fact, if you speak something that has not yet become true, it will, because you've spoken it. And the king, who is a child of the river, further explained that he can never say anything unkind about someone because it will become true. And so he has to live his life in equanimity and in compassion because his words will come true. Now, as a storyteller, we know that we have different stories. We have the story, what I say, of the women and the story of the men. And the one thing we have to say as storytellers is they're both true. It's not one or the other, but it's both. That we, as compassionate, parents or just humans, know what it is to say, I care for you so much that I'm willing to be turned into a river to sustain you. And my prayer for us all is that our stories are just that our stories are the river Olu, and that they bring not only compassion and refreshment and healing, but the truth in all its many forms. Thank you.
Wow, Jim. Well, as I started this Kaylee, the stories here are meant to be lent from one another. And if there's stories to be told on and on and on until the whole world understands the story, well, this could be very well the story. Actually, well, it might be a bit of a sideline, but 2 Sundays ago, it was my 63rd birthday. And that's not old, it's just a little older. Just old enough to have a second layer of understanding about an old gospel song that I've known all my life. And now suddenly I got this third verse from this song, and it's a bit like this. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside. And because I'm not a puber no more, I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. And I gotta lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. I'm gonna tell that story of Jim down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna tell that story that Jim just told us. Down by the riverside, down by the riverside. For I ain't gonna study no war no more. I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. I ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. Ain't gonna study no war no more. So now I only have to think of that. How do you do that? Become a river. Well, maybe just by being a storyteller. You are the river that waters the souls of people. Well, at least, Jim, you just did. Thank you very much. Anyway, that was a lot of Marin again. And that while we still have Ross, who is hiding himself with a shutdown camera, and we have Rona with a stiff neck that wants to keep her neck warm, and the voice, the vocal cords, because she knows I do need that vocal cords, because there's so many people here wanting to hear my stories. Rona, please, please give us one of your stories.
Okay, I hope the technology is working while I tell the story. It's been going on and off like Billy-O. Okay, I've been able to hear everything that's going on at your end, and it's been marvellous. That was great as well, Jim. Thanks for sharing that. So I'll share a wee tale with you now. Let me just think about that now. What was I going to tell you? I had it all lined up if I got on. I was going to tell you something. I can't remember what it was. I've spent so much of my energy listening. Oh, I know. I was going to tell you the story of the Snow Queen. I heard this story again. It was a favourite of mine for many years, and I'm sure most of you will know David Heathfield, who has been doing this wonderful job with the kids in Gaza and swapping stories, etc. He does that all over the world. I don't think there's any political connection in any way. It's just that he was already connected to the teachers in Gaza before the Troubles. So this story was told by one of the children, and she made such a terrific job of it. She was so enthusiastic, so excited, and she even had some special effects in the story, which were just incredible. So I would like to share the story with you now. I don't have any special effects, unfortunately, just me. So I'll have to be your special effects. I'm sorry if the screen's jumping around. I'm trying to steady the picture. Okay. Once there were two friends, two very good friends, and as a symbol of their affection and, in fact, love for each other, they decided to design a small garden in front of each of their homes where they grew roses, and they tended these roses daily. And one day, when they had finished tending the roses, Gerda suggested they go to her grandma to hear a story. Her grandma lived with her. And as she's walking in to speak to grandma, she's all excited. She already knows the story she wants to hear. Grandma, tell us the story of the Snow Queen. And Kai starts to mock her. Snow Queen, don't be ridiculous. She doesn't even exist. Oh, your imagination, it'll be the death of you, Gerda. Well, the Snow Queen in her castle has a magic mirror that lets her see everything going on everywhere. And especially if she should happen to hear her name crop up, she instantly hones in, and she had heard this. And she honed right in to Gerda's grandma's living room, and there was Kai. Don't believe in me? Don't believe in me, you foolish boy. I will teach you a lesson. I am going to send my ice arrows to pierce your eyes and pierce your heart. Even as she was speaking those words, the Snow Queen's ice arrows were heading towards Kai, and they went straight for him. They were invisible, so he never saw them coming. But he felt them as soon as they hit his eyes and his heart, and he started to stagger around the room, and Gerda and her grandmother were looking at him, shocked what was happening, and he stumbled past Gerda, pushing her aside as he ran from the house and presumably home. But Gerda never saw any sign or anything of him for the next few days. And then on the morning of, I think, day 5, she was out in the garden tending the roses, and she saw Kai climbing into the carriage of the Snow Queen. And she ran to try and stop him and try and pull him off, but she wasn't quick enough. And as she reached out again to try and get onto the carriage, it disappeared into thin air, along with the Snow Queen and Kai. Oh, Gerda was beside herself. She was so shocked. She ran in and told her grandmother what had happened. Well, as it happens, Snow Queen wasn't the only one who had a magic mirror. Gerda's grandmother, who was more than a grandmother, had also had a magic mirror, and she gave it to Gerda and showed her how to use it and said, "Go, this mirror will look after you. Just do what it tells you. Go and find your Kai." So she packed for her journey and she left. It was going to be much more difficult than she thought it would be to track down the Snow Queen. For days, for weeks, she walked. She stopped to eat, to rest. She took advantage of some people's good neighbourly kindness. Unfortunately, she still had a little bit of money left. And then she came across the flower garden. She had heard of this place, but she had never seen it. And she was walking through these flowers that went on and on forever. Every possible species of flowers you could imagine. But there was something very strange. Although these flowers were beautiful, they had no perfume. She opened the magic mirror to speak to Grandma and told her what she could see, and she held the mirror for her grandmother to see. And her grandmother said, "Oh yes, I know where you are. Just touch one of the flowers. Gently, Gerda, just touch one of the flowers." And she did. And suddenly the air was filled with perfume. And the flower lady appeared from nowhere. "How did you do this?" she said. "What has happened? This is incredible. My flowers have their perfume back." Gerda said, "I'm not quite sure. I just got some help from Grandma." And she opened the mirror and showed the flower lady, and the flower lady said, "I know who your Grandma is. How can I help you?" And Gerda said, I'm trying to find the castle of the Snow Queen." "Oh," the flower lady said, "I can tell you where to find it. But you know, it's a very dangerous place." Gerda said, "I don't care. I have to go and find my friend. The Snow Queen has taken him." And the flower lady said, "Well, if you follow this road all the way to the end, you'll come to the river. And across the river, you will see the castle. So you have to get across the river." The flower lady thanked her again for restoring the perfume to her flowers. Gerda thanked the lady for giving her the instructions on how to get to the castle, and they parted company. When she reached the river, there was a pirate ship there. And Gerda called for somebody's attention, and the captain of the pirate ship appeared, asked her what she wanted, and said, "How can I help you?" And she said, "Well, I'm looking to find the castle of the Snow Queen because she has taken my friend and I have to go and find him and bring him back." And the captain looked at her and he said, "Oh, you're just a young girl. You know, this is a very dangerous place you're talking about. I could tell you how to get there, but you'll be in danger." "I don't care," she said. "I have to find my friend Kai. And I have some help here." And she held up the mirror, but she didn't open it. And the pirate just nodded and said, "Well, if you must." He said, "But I don't want to let you go. I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stay here with me because I have never had a friend. You will be my first friend." Gerda said, "No, no, 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 I must go and find Kai. If you help me to find Kai, I will come back and be your friend from then on." "Do you promise?" he said. "Yes," she said, "I will be your friend." "Oh, well, in that case, I will tell you what to do when you get to the castle." And he gave her a couple of instructions. He said, "But remember, the most important thing, that the Snow Queen is filled with hate and anger. And the only way to overcome hate and anger is with love and courage." Well, Gerda had heard that before from her grandmother many, many times. And she said to the captain, "I know." And then she went on her way. She hired a man who was rowing people across to the island, not where the castle was, to the other island. So he was a bit reticent when she asked to go to the island where the castle of the Snow Queen was. I don't go there, he said. It's a very dangerous place. And she said, well, I'll give you this. It was all the money she had left. If you will take me and just drop me off. You don't have to come anywhere near the castle. So he agreed and he took her there. Her heart was beating. She could even feel it beating. She could hear it beating as she struggled up the hill. It wasn't far to the castle. And when she got there and crossed over the bridge where the moat was, this door was huge, and she looked at it and she thought, I'm never going to be able to get in there. But when she touched it with just one finger, it opened very easily. She went inside and she started to call, Kai, Kai, almost in a whisper. She realised she'd have to be a little bit louder. Kai, Kai. Still no response. And then suddenly, as she turned a corner, she saw him there in the faraway corner, frozen solid. She couldn't believe it. Oh no. And she ran towards him and knelt in front of him. And she took his hands and looked into his eyes. Kai, it's me, Gerda. Look at me, please. Suddenly the Snow Queen appeared. Oh, what do you think you're doing here? I know you. You were the girl who was in the house of the grandmother. I know, said Gerda, and I've come to take Kai back, and you can't stop me. Oh, no, said the Ice Twin. He can't hear you. He can't see you. He is mine. He is almost frozen solid, and when the ice reaches his heart and freezes completely, he will be mine forever. No, said Gerda, no. And she held his hands and she squeezed his hands. Look at me, Kai, look at me. And suddenly Kai looked at her. And when he saw the love in her eyes, he smiled. No, said the Snow Queen, no, you cannot break my power. Kai stood up and he embraced Gerda. And the Snow Queen fell into such a fit of rage and anger she almost boiled over. But she didn't boil over. Gerda opened the magic mirror and held it in front of the Snow Queen, and she melted into a puddle. Guy and Gerda, hand in hand, walked from the castle. Did the Snow Queen ever reappear? I don't know. I will leave that for you to decide.
And there she was again, Rona Barbour, thinking she could have benefit from artificial effects. And she had this wonderful effect on us all, that we were all sucked into the story and forgot who we were. We were all there, close to that frightening Snow Queen. Anyway, I think even though she is knitting right now, we have a lady who has not been telling us stories for quite some time, but it would be so wonderful to hear Helle Janke tell us a story. Would you feel like that? Or am I just a bit overwhelming now? He said, oh, where's my knitting needles?
I haven't prepared, but I have a story that I told in Danish, so I can try to translate it. Would you like to
Yes.
hear that?
Yes, but not everyone here understands Dutch, so you better translate that into English then.
Okay. The story is about a woman, a young lady actually, who feels like getting married. She's even a princess. And she wants to get married, but she she has a hard time finding somebody to marry because whoever she meets is not, no, that wouldn't work. So she goes to the kitchen and she takes out a bowl and she measures out flour, butter, sugar, and eggs. And while she mixes it, she sings cheerfully. And from the dough, she shapes a man and leaves him to rest, to what you do with the dough, for 40 days and 40 nights. And for the 41st, in the 41st morning, he starts moving. And quickly she finishes this man. She gives him eyes out of almonds. There's a saying with that in Danish. I don't know, but eyes of almonds, and she uses marzipan for his ears, sweet marzipan for his ears and his nose. And for the mouth, she finds a cherry, a red cherry, like a kissing cherry. And he blinks and looks her in her eyes. They look in each other's eyes, and then they're a couple, and that's just great. She is a princess, so she has work to be done. She's a protege of different things, and she gets around, and sometimes she finds stuff that she thinks will match exactly well for her man. Her, what is he in English? He is, in Danish, he's the cake man. I think I will just call him the cake man. And she finds this kind of knitting. Actually, it's a sweater. Every man she sees wears this kind of sweater. It goes on the body very nicely, so she can see the shape of the body, and it goes up to here. Like it makes you look very manly if you're a man. She gets loads of this, brings it back to the castle, and she puts it over his head. The cake man gets this, and he is, of course, very, very happy with his new woolen sweater with this turtleneck, because as we know, cake men, they have actually their heads are quite close to the shoulders, so but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't tell her anything. He just smiles and says, "Thank you, my love." And he's a gorgeous man. He's a gorgeous cake man, and he's so gorgeous that all over the kingdom, whenever his name is mentioned, the teeth waters. I don't know if you can say this in English, but it's like the water of the mouth starts rinning in every drow. There's some drows with every woman, every girl in the whole kingdom. And also there's a queen living far away. She hears about this cake man, and she wants him. So she sails off for this man and for this harbor, and she's sure, this queen from far away, that when she reaches the shore with her boat, with a golden, the kind of house you have where you live if you're on a boat, it's of gold, then the cake man will come and see, and it will be easy for her to get him on board. And she also asks her men working there, she tells them what to do. And sure enough, when the boat enters the harbor, the princess is somewhere, and the cake man looks out of the window and he sees everybody going to the harbor, and he goes as well, and he's invited on board. He's taken into the golden house, and as soon as he's there, the boat sets off, and he is now on the sea before he even notices anything. But the men working for the queen, they see that he has troubles with this woolen sweater. It's not nice for him. So they offer him that he can wear some of their clothes, and he does. And they also teaches him how to play cards. And actually he has quite a good time there. But the princess, when she finds out that her cake man is gone, she wants to find him. And she wants to walk to the end of the world, if that's what is needed. And she walks to the end of the world. She still hasn't found him. So she jumps to the sky, and she walks to the moon. He's not there, but then she just waits, and he gets home. He's a little bit drunk. In Danish, that is the same word for the drunk moon is the full moon. So he's drunk, and then she asks him, she's very polite. She asks him, have you seen my dear man, Mr. Cake Man? He's delicious, and he's gorgeous, and he's wearing a woolen sweater with turtleneck. But the moon man, he's like, what? Cake Man? That's a really funny name for a man. And unfortunately, I haven't seen him, but and then she almost starts crying, the princess. But then he suggests her to go to visit his sister, the sun, because she sees everything clearly. But before she leaves, he hands over a present for her. He says, he gives her a little black bag, and he says, if you're ever in need, you open this one. And she thanks him and goes off to see the sun. The sun is not there, but she waits. The sun comes home, she's shining, and the princess asks her, have you seen my beloved Mr. Cake Man? He's a gorgeous man, and he's wearing woolen sweater with a turtleneck. Have you seen him? The sun is a little bit confused. Excuse me, Mr. Cake Man? Is that what you call your man? Cake Man? And the princess, yeah, well, yes, but and the sun hasn't seen him, and the princess is crying, but then the sun suggests her to go to visit the stars, because they are so many. Maybe they have seen. And the sun gives her a present wrapped in something red. Open it if you are ever in need. The princess goes to see the stars. And she waits there, because they are like, it takes a while for all the stars to come home. But as soon as they are there, she asks, have you seen my gorgeous man, the Cake Man? He is wearing a woolen sweater with a turtleneck. And none of the stars has seen him. And they are even laughing of this name, Mr. Cake Man. What is that what you call him? But then the princess starts crying, and then they want to help her. And then luckily there's one star, it's coming late. And this star says, I've seen him. He was on the boat of the queen who lives, how do you say this? The east of the sun, the west of the, that's also something you say in fairy tales, far, far away, in the land far, far away. So the princess, she gets a present, of course. It's wrapped in white. Whenever she needs it, just open it. She jumps to the rainbow, and she gets to the castle of the land far, far away, the queen far, far away. She knocks the door and shouts, You have my cake man, but I'm the one he loves, and I'm the one who made him, and I'm the one who's going to eat him. And the queen says, if you come any further, Mr. Cake Man will end up in my stomach. So she backs up a little bit and she sits down and tries to get an idea of what to do, to figure out what to do. But she actually gets hope, she loses hope. But then the moon comes and she remembers the present from the moon. She opens it. It's a stone that shines like silver. And the queen notices she wants this stone. So they trade. The princess is allowed inside on the other side of the door if the queen gets the stone. Then time passes, the sun comes to the sky and she opens the next little red bag. It's a stone that shines like gold. The queen sees the gold and she wants it, and they bargain, and now the princess gets into the castle. But of course the queen sees that she doesn't get close to Mr. Cake Man. So she waits, and when the stars are on the sky, she opens the white bag. It's full of diamonds, and the lights are everywhere, and the queen sees it. She wants this, and they bargain, and the princess is allowed into the room, the bedroom of the queen and the cake man. And shouldn't be a problem, because the queen just made the layer of this sugar coating for him to have sweet dreams. And the layer is so thick that he should not wake up. But of course, the princess runs to him and she licks up all of this coating. He opens his eyes, sees her. And then the cake man takes her little hand in his and tells her, I'm not the cake man you used to know. I know now that I don't like wearing woolen sweaters with turtleneck. And also now I know how to play cards. Then they agree that he will no longer have to wear turtlenecks, and also she would like to learn how to play cards. Now the queen enters the room, and she has all these stones with lights everywhere. So it's crazy with lights, and the cake man and the princess, they try to escape. They run. And then something really strange happens, because then the stone that was shining like silver turns into cheese. Really, really smelly cheese. So smelly that even a queen starts smelling of cheese when she has this stone. And the stone that was shining like gold, it turns into butter that is so greasy that even a queen falls. She slips when she is close to it, and the queen slips. And the diamonds, they turn into milk, so much milk that even a queen looks like a cow when she's standing in it, and she looks like a cow. So the couple gets away, and the queen, she's standing there. She is soaking from milk. She's greasy from butter, and she's smelling like an old cheese. And she decides that she has to do something about this. So she goes to the kitchen and she puts down some flour, some eggs. She puts down even some sugar, a little, some of the butter that she has on her, and she She swears while she's working the dough, and she clutches up a man and she puts him in the corner to lie there for 40 days and 40 nights. And then when she looks at it, it's all rotten. But the cake man and the princess, they have the time of their life, and they play card games and they enjoy.
Super, Helle. I am so grateful to myself that I forced you into telling this story, even unprepared. It is wonderful. And I was thinking, if I was the queen at the end of this story, I would probably hum something like this. I look at you all, see the love that I'm sleeping, while my guitar gently weeps. I look at the floor and I see it needs sweeping. While my cleaner is asleep. Well, anyway, in my mind, that was a wonderful song. Sorry for your loss of time. We still didn't hear from Ross. And even though Ross forgot that in Europe we already have summertime, he is still so welcome. And who can be angry at Santa Claus, our wonderful leprechaun from Tampa Bay, Florida? Ross, my friend, do you have a story?
Well, I have a story I'm starting to work on, so I'll victimize you by running through it. But to do it, we have to turn the clock back, roll it back about exactly 100 years. Run it back so that we're talking about the man who became our president here in the States for the Second World War. So that we're talking about a time before Roosevelt became president, but after he had been stricken with polio. His legs were paralyzed. But at 42 in 1924, he still had all of the energy and the drive of a dynamic young man. His legs were paralyzed, but he was convinced that he could bring them back to life. And he struggled every day with what we now refer to as physical therapy, with exercises, with all kinds of things, trying to get back to where he would be able to walk. Now, he, like everyone else who live in the colder climes of the northeastern United States, wanted to spend a lot of time in the winter in Florida. And he did. He, with his, well, I guess we can say his mistress, went to Florida in February of 1924 so that they could actually go out on this huge houseboat that he had bought with one of his wealthy buddies in Miami. Now, this houseboat, far from being what you would expect from a successful, very, very wealthy combination of two men, was often described around the harbor as being a tenement on the water. But it was huge. And inside, it was fabulous. And even better, it was 1,000 miles away from Eleanor Roosevelt. And the future president could spend time with his mistress, and swimming, which he was convinced would bring life back to his legs. Every day he swam. But eventually, that February in 1924, he grew tired of being shadowed by sharks and grew upset about the fact that if he went into the deeper water, there were sharks everywhere and it was too uncomfortable to swim. So he made the decision. The boat went into dry dock. It was put into a marina to be sold when he and she left and went back north with his partner's agreement. The problem is that was the year that up until then they had the greatest hurricane in recorded history. It drove that houseboat back into the water and 1 mile up the river. Well, they tried hard to sell it. They almost had it sold to be used as a hunting launch. But eventually, it was just too much of a shambles, and it had to be scrapped. Then we can roll the clock forward 10 years, knowing, well, 9 years to 1933, when we know the now president-elect was very much used to going to South Florida, to the Keys, to Miami, to the entire area for tropical winters. He loved being there. He loved the waters. He loved being out, and he had many wealthy friends with boats, so there was never a question of whether or not they would be sailing. And again, it was 1,000 miles away from Eleanor, which made the vacation much more enjoyable. He and his mistress would go where they wanted, what they wanted to do. They were having a fabulous time. Now, the local press found out that he was in town. Well, a president-elect in town is a newsworthy item. And so local politicians, just before he was going to leave to go back north, descended on Roosevelt and finally got him agreed to do one speech at the waterfront park in Miami. Now, Roosevelt, always the astute politician, would never let them see him being lifted from a car or put in to a wheelchair and positioned to speak. And so he made the arrangements that he would arrive in a convertible and he would give his speech from the convertible. Common sense. No one sees that he's still paralyzed. Everyone knew, but he was so conscious of it. It controlled his life. In that crowd, however, responding to the front page news item of the day saying that the president-elect was going to speak, it caught the attention of an immigrant, an unemployed, destitute immigrant, very unhappy with what he had gotten himself into. Very, very. Giuseppe Zangaro. wanted badly to kill President Hoover because he blamed him for the Depression. But when he heard that President-elect Roosevelt was going to be at the park, it seemed his attitude was clearly one of, close enough. He dressed as best he could. He put on the squeaky shoes. He pulled on a coat that was really too warm for Miami at that time of the year, because he could conceal a small 5-shot gun, a pistol, in the pocket. And there he went, working his way through the crowd, the cheering people. Everyone wanted to see him. There were politicians everywhere. There was even a politician from Chicago right there with the president. Politician that had worked his way up from being a push cart guy on the streets of Chicago, becoming the mayor of Chicago. A man who had gone from absolute destitution as a child to being a very wealthy and super influential and powerful man. And with him, the conversation flowed with President-elect Roosevelt. There were other politicians from all over the Miami area. Everybody wanted a piece of the action. Everybody wanted to be in the pictures. Everybody was interested. They were crowded around the car. Giuseppe pushed, slipped, and sort of squirmed between different people. But one lady right there at the front of the crowd wouldn't move, and she gave him a dirty look, and he looked vacantly at her as he lifted the pistol from his pocket. She saw it come. She saw it come out of the pocket. She saw him lift his arm. She could stand so close, she could see the hairs on his arm. And as he lifted it, he pulled back the hammer. And she, acting quickly, flipped her arm up, knocked his arm into the air. And he was firing rapidly, fired every shot out from the gun. He hit 5 people. 5 people were shot that day by Giuseppe. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt was not one of them. However, Mayor Cermak from Chicago was. He was wounded. Everyone assumed he'd be all right because he actually walked to transport to go to the hospital, where the next day he died. And since that day, the conspiracy theories have flowed around Chicago that Giuseppe, being Italian, was obviously a mob hitman contracted to do away with Cermak, who had problems with the Chicago mob, meaning Al Capone. The president-elect, went on to be president. He survived. But today, few people remember there were 5 people who were shot in that attempted assassination. And it was an attempted assassination of not really the president Giuseppe wanted to kill, but one president's as good as another. Now, when they took Giuseppe, and by the way, it took almost no time to try and convict Giuseppe. In 3 weeks, he was on death row. And when they took him, he was not about to remain silent. Of course, he had never been particularly silent, because today it would be more interesting, because the doctors and the coroners, etc., would have to figure out why. He constantly complained about pain in his stomach, constantly complained about pain in his stomach, constantly complained about capitalists too, constantly complained and felt that he was being mistreated, mishandled. And as they had him in hand and holding him down into the electric chair, state prison in Railford, Giuseppe had his famous last words. He yelled, "Lousy capitalists!" at the reporters that completely surrounded the electric chair, taking pictures with those big M5 flash bulbs. Flashing everywhere. Lousy capitalists! No pictures! But they took the pictures anyway. And then as the hood was put over his head, not to be silent anymore, Giuseppe said, "Go ahead, push the button." They did.
Wow. And then that for a last story of an event like we had today. Such a loving, lovely event. That was a wonderful story, man. And stories that should be remembered as well. We should not skip those parts of history. But for me myself, I could do with some Ann Lister music to end this session. And by the way, I'm not going to edit this little movie because I think it was one of the most powerful Kayleys we had in months, and I'm gonna put it just like it was on our YouTube channel. And of course, you're not allowed to share because I ask you to, but of course, you can tell your friends that we have that YouTube channel. And if they want, they could see our last Kaylee. And maybe we even have more storytellers next time. Anyway, are you ready to play the song, man?
Yes, although I haven't got my guitar because the guitar, I didn't think about this ahead of time. The guitar isn't in tune, and I have a bit of a cold, so I have a bit of a croaky throat. But what I'm going to sing you is a song which is two songs put together. One is a traditional song, and so there's a couple of verses of that, and then my own bit, and then I finish with another verse of the traditional song.
And so I understand this is from a special pond where some little frogs sing about wonderful storytelling songs. A song, well, and is going to try to imitate that frog sound. So enjoy if you want, but it would be nice if you would mute yourself. You can wither to have a better understanding of the feel of the song. Thank you all for attending, and see you next month.
Farewell, farewell, my own true love. Farewell for a while, I'm going away, but I'll return if I go 10,000 miles. 10,000 miles, my own true love. 10,000 miles or more, and the rocks may melt and the seas run dry if I no more return. And don't you see yon turtle dove sitting on that high, high tree? She's singing for her own true love, as I do weep for mine. All my heroes have grown older, the excitement couldn't last, and the nights are growing colder, and I think the summer's past. It's far too late for dreaming, it seems a long way home. Standing straight instead of leaning, it's tough to stand alone. The highway's full of stories, and the streets are full of ghosts, and I'm walking down the byways where I used to walk the most. They've pulled my old school down where my love and I once played, and they've built upon the waste ground where my love and I once lay. Last night we sang the old songs, with our voices still as clear, although some were far from strong, and some others were not here. Old age is just a burglar, with no compassion in his soul, and we wake one sunny morning, wondering how we got so old. So now the heat of summer has turned to autumn's chill, and all those springtime blossoms have turned to compost fill. Time has destroyed so many now dead and gone. Their memory is all that's left in the echoes of a song. But I'll lean against my lover, the man that I love best. His arms are warm around me, and I know that I am blessed. Let's raise a glass to friends now gone, and those who still remain. Let's raise a glass to friends now gone, and start to sing again. But oh, come back, my own true love, and sit a while with me. For if I had a friend in all this world, you have been that friend to me. Thank you.
Wow. And hereby I promise never to eat frog legs no more. If I would have known that frogs could sing like that, I would buy them on album. I would make sure I had their Spotify channel. Thank you for the best darn frog sound I ever heard. And thank you for that amazing last song. Oh, I see that Jim asked me for the name of the YouTube channel. It should be Theme Time Story Swap, I think. Yeah, let me check that for. How do I do so? My channel. Dun, 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 dun. How do I share that?
Put it in the chat.
Sorry. Read the chat. Is there a theme for next month? Okay. Anyone who raises a hand, the first one to raise a hand can come up with a new theme, because I don't have a clue. Any hands? Okay, chin will do as well. Helle, your chin was most up in the air. So Helle, what will be next month's theme? And you can first unmute yourself. You
I
are
was
very
wondering,
best.
did you celebrate World Storytelling Day?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you have already had
Oh, we did not celebrate it in the Ceilidh.
Okay.
But building bridges.
Yeah, it could be.
Many of us already made stories or found stories about bridges. Thank you, Helle, for a magical idea. You're not only cute and a wonderful storyteller, you also have some amazing ideas. Next month's theme is building bridges. Or using bridges, or sleeping under bridges, or
Reaching
bridges.
out, peace and compassion.
Peace and okay. And about, well, Cathy can talk about her teeth because she has some bridges in her mouth as well. And since normally when Cathy opens her mouth, some beautiful bridges come out. Um, and her dentist actually likes that a lot because he or she has to put those bridges back in again. And that's why Cathy still has to do her job, even though other people on her age already enjoy their pension. But next month's stories are about Cathy's teeth and other bridges. That's cool with you, Cathy? Cool. Well, you all made me very happy today. It was, well, literally being at home with friends from everywhere. And that's exactly why I came up with this scaly in Corona time. Well, who needs Corona? But we do need friends. And you are there. Thank you. See you next month. The first Sunday of the month, summertime, especially for us, one more time. 14:30 Central European summertime. See you then. Have a good time.
Yeah, Marin, I thought that since we now have gone on daylight savings time, I thought we were on the same jump, but obviously I was wrong.
No prop. No prop. You're
So
welcome.
you staying
anyway.
out of trouble?
Yeah.
Are you still doing the cafe?
Yeah. Yeah,
Ah.
and the last couple of months without me having to give it a financial injection, it can sort of pay for itself. And it's not that I do pay the main storyteller a lot of money. I can just afford 150 euros. I'm not sure what the rate is for dollars, euros at the moment.
Yeah, that's close.
But so it is actually not a lot of money, but at least I pay now the rent voluntarily because the cafe didn't want me to pay for the rent, but it feels good to pay the rent, and I pay the taxes, and because I'm proud to be able to pay taxes for an art form. If the government doesn't want for art, the art will pay the government. So
Yeah, well, here in Florida, our highly conservative governor just pushed through the legislature a bill to reduce the amount paid out for arts projects in half.
well, it's,
So
it's the
state
same
budget
here.
cut in half.
It might here it might have to do. It seems that liberal people think that art is just what we see as artists as the products of art. I mean, the real art is in the making art, is in the dealing with life and the world by expressing yourself. And because of doing so, you can handle shit you wouldn't be able to handle if there was no way to express it. So I think, especially right-winged governments, they should be so happy that there is art because of having art, we are not rebels. Well, it's as we say in the Netherlands, a horse on a stick. So when you have a subject that you can't stop thinking about, you can't stop talking about, it's your horse on a stick. So when I come with this subject at home, my wife said, "Oh, your stable door is open again." So I'm glad I could share my horse on a stick with you.
Very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that the cafe is still going well. That's great. That's great. I would like to be able to do that here, but I haven't been able to pull it off. So keep struggling
With
with it.
me, it was just a very long breathing in, breathing out. I have been doing it for 10 years. And that first year was only Wendy, my audience. And the second year was Wendy and my daughter and someone who was coincidentally in the cafe and didn't finish his beer. So they politely waited and drank the beer. And then they waited till the story finished and then they left. So it has been like that for years. And now I have this score of 30, 40 people max. And that's just the amount that I love. I had once 50 in January, and for me that was too much. Also, because in your break, if 50 people want to have a cup of coffee and want to go to the toilet, you need a long break. And I didn't want to have that long break. I wanted to have the stories. So I said, okay, from now on, I only sell 40 tickets. And people pay and they come and they tell each other and they come from all around.
Super.
Yeah.
Very good. Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
sir. Well, take good care of yourself. Put the address for the what is it, YouTube?
Yeah, I think if you Google on online World Ceilidh, then you should be there.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. So first YouTube online as one word, and then World Ceilidh. Let me see what happens then. First I get Facebook, I get my own website, I go a little down, 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 down. Well, that's not easy. Maybe, and what happens if I say videos? I was hoping that it would come up, but it doesn't.
Well, figure out what it is and either text it or email it out to everybody.
Yeah, I will. Okay.
All right, sir. Stay well.
See you then. Have a good time, man.
Bye.
See you next month.
Oops, where are we? Here we go.